Hello, everybody, and welcome to Reads Spider-Man Crawl Space Edition. Please check us out at the SpidermanCrawlspace.com. Well, guys, I'm here, of course, to review the post-mortem of Last Rites in issue 56, aka 857, as well as review Symbiote Spider-Man issue 3 of the King in Black crossover, as well as give an update on the King in Black crossover review, which will happen right after the release of issue 3 to make up for the pieces of the delays, and I will talk about those delays shortly. So let's kick on off with Nick Spencer and Mark Bagley's, of course, aftermath of Last Rites in Amazing 56. So first of all, the pros. I have to say this is a very amazing follow-up. After Last Rites kind of really didn't stick the landing, this aftermath is actually pretty incredible. The talk about actually how Norman Osborn and Kingpin worked out their deal, how they used the Spot and the Dark Force energy, which was actually established by Mark Waid during his Daredevil run with both the Spot and, of course, Coyote, really explains how they use and how the Dark Force energy is able to contain Harry Osborn as Kindred because of the Dark Force energy able to contain Mystic energy. And it's really amazing because there's a really amazing plot twist where we thought that Norman was able to keep the Sin Eater away and actually find out that actually he was just pretending to be evil. He really has been cleansed of his sins and, of course, his powers. He was using enhanced armor as well as his plan with Mary Jane as a flash grenade just to get Harry captured, that this was all part of the plan, even though he's pretending to be evil, and the fact that his powers have not returned since the Sin Eater, of course, took himself away, and all his used powers returned to the Lethal Legion and everybody else, including, of course, Overdrive. And it's just an amazing character work on the history of both Norman Osborn's relationship with Harry, not to mention the pieces with the Kingpin and how he's moving more and more of what he wants to use the Lifeline tablet for. Also, the pieces, of course, were all being very happy that Mary Jane is good and well, and her interaction with Peter is really good, but also some more of the mystery that actually Kindred's not just mad about one more day, but something else Norman Osborn did that's involved with whatever led him becoming Kindred. It's a very extra mystery that actually builds off the current one with Last Rites. And not to mention everything using with Carly Cooper and Overdrive is also pretty good, because this is another subplot that has been moved along from Superior Foes of Spider-Man that, of course, Nick Spencer introduced quite a long time ago. And the art by Mark Bagley is absolutely incredible. This is pretty much makes up for some of the not-so-great artwork that was done during Last Rites, even though Patrick Gleason had followed up a lot with a half of that storyline. But it really makes it a beautiful, telling, character-drive story that's just really well. Cons, though, however, is once again, we don't know what's going on. It feels like we finished the stage and we still don't really have answers. Like, really, what does Harry want? Really, how did he become Kindred? And really, why is he being so silent now? Also, not to mention whatever happened. I mean, we know what the Lethal Legion was supposed to do, but of course, even Norman brings up, like, why did you bring up the Sin Eater? Really, what was the point of that? And of course, it's also interesting here because now we're seeing the return of the Spider-Man cast, which has really not been really well used for the last, I say, 8 months of 2020. And now all of a sudden, Aunt May, the Feast Center, Randy Robertson, who's actually dealing with the aftermath of course, Janice Lincoln as the Beetle and the Sinister Syndicate is actually coming back into play. And of course, we see Martin Lee, who's now fearing for Mr. Negative returning. Now the Sin Eater has actually returned all the powers, but Norman Osborn. It just feels like all of a sudden was like, okay, now the cast has to come back. And oh yeah, we have to bring up those subplots actually with Randy and Janice and their relationship and how it's a bad thing, even though Randy knows he brought it on himself, yet he's been talking about how Fred's the greatest roommate and Peter's not so great of a roommate. It's kind of like now all of a sudden it seems to be Randy Robertson changes when the plot demands it more than what the character himself is doing, even though Aunt May brings up a lot with his relationships and other things too. And I think that's really what a con everything is, because between what happened in Last Rites and some of these other subplots that have just been stewing for the last 2.5 years, it feels like now we're going to get those taken care of, and yet we still have mysteries such as, of course, the Chameleon subplot, everything going on with Nora Winters and more. I mean, there's so much to shove into a storyline, but now it's all like, okay, this part of the storyline's over, folks. Now let's get back to those questions, because I think you want them to be wrapped up, I want them to wrapped up, and actually explain what this does with the story. And that kind of brings down the grade, and I'll give it a solid A here for Amazing Spider-Man 56. It's really, really good storyline, but like I said, all of a sudden it feels like we're not getting the answers again. We have to wait some more, and of course now the cast members and other subplots that have been around since Nick Spencer's run are now just coming back in finally now, when they've really not even been talked about for actually about 6 months. Storyline wise, I know the pandemic didn't help things, as well as other issues with publications of Amazing Spider-Man, but now we're getting back to it. But it lowers it down to a straight A for me. And on that note, guys, let's move on to, of course, the Symbiote Spider-Man King in Black crossover, issue 3 by Peter David and Greg Land. First of all the pros. I mean, I've said it before the last 2 issues, and even the previous Symbiote Spider-Man. This just feels like it perfectly fits in the continuity of the black costume, while building up extra story, but not really poo-pooing on other things with the symbiote. And I really like the fact that, you know, this is a time during the 80s in the black costume saga where we have something like the Black Knight and Monica Rambeau when she was still Captain Marvel in the current Avengers roster that was going on there, that why Spider-Man knows who King the Conqueror is and how dangerous he is, he doesn't know about who Rocket Raccoon is, neither does Monica or some of the other cast members. Nowhere really wasn't introduced for another 20 years in the storylines in Guardians of the Galaxy, but how it all puts together. And Peter David really makes a great use of the continuity in the storyline to move it forward, continue a little bit more of the mystery of Mr. E and the symbiote connection with Null, the King in Black, and storyline, and how this actually is kind of falling into the storyline where he's trying to work stuff, but we're not quite sure the main plan about how this goes into trying to free Null or how it was. But it really builds up a wonderful story about exactly how the Ebony Blade is very important, which goes into the upcoming Black Knight miniseries and some other things about what has happened between Mr. E, the symbionts, and how the powers and personalities of work. And I really like how, you know, King the Conqueror has really got to do this because he has no choice. It's a very Avengers Forever King the Conqueror during the Infinity War, which actually made a Destiny War, I should say, which was much more character driven by Kurt Busiek. And I really like this version of King the Conqueror because while he's a despot in planning, he does have an honor system about him. And I really like the fact that Spider-Man actually punches him a few times, and so does Monica, before he actually shows like, okay, you know, I'm protected. But it really flows into it. And I really like actually making sense not only nowhere, but actually how Ulik the Troll comes in the cliffhanger here about how it all ties in the storyline. But that also kind of goes a little bit to the cons too. I mean, this is still a storyline that's really playing with fire. It's trying to make use of the King in Black storyline crossover that will end here in a couple of months, and trying to actually keep it within that continuity. Alien Reality with Doctor Strange and everything, with him knowing about the symbiote and everything, was very, very plateau, and also making sure it stayed within the context of both characters, not to reveal too many secrets about the black alien costume. And it also does an interesting thing. Greg Land's art's actually very good, but then it does get to points where you do see some of the classic tracing and reusing materials for the art style, why some of it is nice and reflective. So it's an incredibly engaging storyline, really builds off the friendship between the Avengers and Spider-Man, as well as the continuity of Rocket Raccoon, Nowhere, future Guardians of the Galaxy storylines, and more. But like I said, it does play with fire with the continuity issue, and with 2 issues left, it's going to be interesting to see how this all wraps up and ties into the King in Black storyline. I'm actually going to give it a B+. I was going to give it an A-, but like I said, there are some parts of the story that really kind of make me go, okay, and yet Spider-Man's not going to really be aware of his costume, the symbiote connection, even though Kang is aware of it. That's where we got a little bit of a problem. So I actually brought it down to a B+ for the main storyline. It's still enjoyable. I love what these miniseries are with the Symbiote Spider-Man, and it actually has a relatable connection crossover with the King in Black storyline. So A- and B+ for both Spider-Man stories. And for the update on, of course, the King in Black, due to issues with both weather and releases and me trying to catch up with the storyline, as also some other things, this is, of course, going to be released the weekend of January 10th, and we know it was a very difficult week for a lot of us, and I'm not going to go into that much more. So my plan was to catch up on the rest of my issues, and when after issue 3 comes out of King in Black here in a couple weeks, to do the midpoint as planned for the King in Black crossovers for reviews, and then I'll, of course, wait until we get to, of course, end of March to give the wrap up of what the King in Black storylines was once everything is concluded and finished. So that's the update on the King in Black reviews, guys, and those will be coming here in the next couple weeks. And on that note, guys, I think it's time for me to check out of here. So please check us out at the SpidermanCrawlspace.com or through our social media for many pieces. We're on Discord to Instagram and more for the latest Spider-Man reviews and news and more, and of course our amazing podcast. And if you have any other questions, guys, I will talk to you later, and leave a comment right here in the review, and I will be sure to get back to you. And on that note, I'll see everybody on the crawl space.